Have you ever been stuck in a relationship that feels like a job? Or maybe you have a job that feels like you're stuck in a relationship. Do you ever wonder if moving on is moving up or is just being drug along? And just what is the point of the Odd Life of Timothy Green poster in Philly Mike's office? Hey everybody, I'm Chris and I'm reviewing every episode of The Office ever. And today, we're looking at moving on. That's right, in this double-stuffed episode of The Office, we have drama.
We belong together.
We have intrigue.
You were gone.
I knew it!
We have strangling. And we have Bob Odenkirk doing Bob Odenkirk things.
Django! I don't agree with the use of the N-word in that movie.
Let's go.
I understand nothing.
Our cold opening drops us into the fallout after Aaron busted Andy out about his boat trip to David Wallace. Andy, whose hair is back to normal magically this episode, is floundering, but David Wallace ends up giving him another chance.
I'm not gonna fire you.
You're not?
No.
That's awesome.
I wouldn't own the company if it wasn't for you.
Though I'm not sure Wallace knows about Andy losing that white paper deal that I didn't bring up last field guide. Coming back from the credits, though, and an apparent, indeterminate amount of time, Andy's still struggling with moving on from Aaron.
And how are you on this fine...
Aaron, however, has seemingly already moved on.
Is she moving on a little fast, or am I being a total psycho?
Meanwhile, this is an hour-long episode of The Office, so we're going to be meanwhiling for a bit. Meanwhile, and following the last setup, Jim has also moved on, meaning that he's not actually at the office today. And Pam is flirting with the idea of moving on with him.
Jim set up a job interview for me today in Philly. This is all moving a lot faster than I expected.
Meanwhile, Dwight needs some help taking care of his aunt, who is in need of some help.
It's my Aunt Shirley. She's on her last legs.
Dwight, that's awful.
And we need someone to go out there and clean her up.
And meanwhile, Toby can't shut up about the Scranton Strangler.
Trial.
Oh no, Toby, no. You cannot keep blathering on about this Scranton Strangler. Do something about it.
Great, that's the setup, so let's follow one story at a time, starting with the briefest and easiest to explain. Toby. Doesn't actually feel that easy to explain, but whose identity has centered around being Nellie's man and centered around the Scranton Strangler trial. He is challenged in this episode to do something about it rather than just talking about it, so he gets moving on it.
Hey, that's the name of the show.
He decides he wants to visit George Howard Scubb in prison, and I'm not sure if this is the first time we actually hear the name.
Don't use his real name. George Howard Scubb. It's a devil name.
You must not be named. I wouldn't do that.
Voldemort.
Okay.
Voldemort.
Nellie ends up driving Toby to the prison. But I really think they're just starting to write stories for Nellie that revolve around how Nellie and Catherine Tate have nothing to do around the office.
I am bored.
At the prison, though, Toby says just some things.
How did Bogart put it? I think this is the start of my first friendship.
Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
And he goes inside where the cameras can't follow, so we don't know what he said in there, but he promptly gets strangled.
Well, the good news is no more guilty conscience. At least you know he is the Strangler.
And there's a little poetic play here in which the thing that Toby can't shut up about ends up shutting him up. It's like a curiosity strangled the cat kind of thing.
Why do you have to drag cats into this?
Bonus points because that clip was actually about the Scranton Strangler too. So, a couple things about this plotline organized into a nice bulleted list. A, with his level of obsession, Toby should have just started a podcast, like a true crime podcast. Given that phenomenon didn't actually start until a year later, the best I could tell. But had this been produced in 2014 or beyond, this would have played out like Toby started a true crime Scranton Strangler podcast. Maybe Gabe could have helped him.
Who is going to listen to this nonsense?
Angela. A rare instance of brains and beauty.
B, I made a true crime miniseries set in the universe of The Office, where I took all of the fan theories about the Scranton Strangler and just kind of made like a fictional true crime thing where we just, it's fun, it's dumb, I love it. My friends and my wife played all the parts. They're not actors. Be nice, but also go watch it. See, my hunch was Beyond contributing to the deeper meaning, this story was actually intended to be the answer to the fandom's obsession with who is the Strangler. Like, they already went through the trial, they already went through everything thereafter, and now it's like The Office just trying to put this matter to bed.
That's what she said.
And move on.
Hey, that's the name of the show.
Instead, it just seems like it fueled the conspiratorial fire. D, if you want a more streamlined video about Scranton Strangler theories, check out this one. And E, since I'm just plugging things, join my Patreon so I can loosen the algorithm stranglehold over me. That would be awesome.
Stop.
All right, next plot line. Let's see. Dwight and Angela is probably like the next most straightforward story. So Dwight needing some help with like his aunt, who we've never heard of or seen before, ask Angela to come over and like clean her up. The whole story revolves around some gags and how disgusting she is and how Dwight kind of dehumanizes her like in order to take care of her, which is like a little complex and kind of nuanced.
Here's a box cutter to get her clothes off.
Dwight!
Let's get to it. Give it a whirl.
No! Dwight, I am not going to hose your aunt down like some animal.
Angela's no-nonsense approach makes Dwight wet and...
What is wrong with you? Why did you have to phrase it like that?
And she takes care of his aunt, cleaning and dressing her in her right mind. The story concludes with Dwight putting an offer out on the table to hook up, to which, even after everything she's been through with the senator, says that she just wants to be faithful. To which Dwight seems to really respect and agree with.
Stand by your man. That's what I would want if you were mine.
Then the two part ways, putting to bed, at least so to speak, their relationship for now. On to Andy and Aaron and Pete and Gabe and Alice. Okay, so this one gets weird and sad.
Can't be around sad people. It makes me sad.
I really can't help but wonder if the people who wrote and casted Phyllis for Inside Out did not see this episode.
I could name Pixar movies too. Toy Story.
But after Andy's sad, he gets mad, as he's suspicious now that Aaron is moving on quicker than he. So he invades his employees' / ex-girlfriend's privacy to snoop around a bit. We've all been there. And he learns that she's been talking to a guy named Pete, leading to what I would say is the best joke of this episode.
Found out she's been texting a guy named Pete. Does anybody know a Pete?
Andy has been calling me Plop for so long he forgot my real name, which is Pete.
Both in structure, timing, and editing, this is all top-notch stuff. It's like strong work. Who directed this one? Jon Favreau. Jon is one of my favorites, and I swear that if he turns out to be a scuzzbag like everybody else I've loved, I, like Andy, will never move on from it. But Andy does stumble upon the truth by like lunch, and and then he acts like he doesn't know what the word chlamydia is, even though he like led that sex education episode already.
Turns out I contracted chlamydia from Aaron. And it's incurable.
What?
Why would you choose a pencil, Andy?
Well, I'm not going to use my penis, Oscar. It's not exactly hard right now anyway.
Come on, give it a rest, pencil.
Andy struggles for the rest of the day until Aaron and Pete confront him and encourage him that it is time to move on.
I dated this girl, Alice, and it was an ugly breakup. I'd run into her every day, but I had to grow up and deal with it, and I did.
So the next day, maybe, or within hours, the timeline's a little fuzzy here. Andy brings in Pete's and Aaron's ex-significant others, and of course this creates a lot of awkwardness and tension. Awkward. Ultimately culminating to this pretty unbelievable moment. Mostly from a literary perspective, I don't see any of this really happening in reality, but it is a super well shot.
All right, yes, that is a legitimate question. Does making Aaron and Pete feel bad make me feel better? Yeah.
The camera panning in slowly on Andy, the master of the chaos ceremonies.
Master of ceremonies, Bernard.
This may be one of the best Ed Helm moments in the second half of the series. There's a lot to love and hate with this entire plotline, but I'm just glad to see Gabe for one last very terrible experience.
I am as smooth as a porpoise for you.
And speaking of terrible experiences, that brings us to Jim and Pam. Jim's coworker gets Pam an office manager / receptionist interview in Philly, And when she arrives, she's greeted by Bob Odenkirk, putting in the work to show his best take for what he would have brought to the role of Michael Scott had he gotten the position years ago.
Here at Simon Realty, we are one funky bunch. Come on, you guys, raise the roof when I say that.
Probably play hard when we should be working hard, but that's probably my fault, but fire me.
Look at all this wall space. Imagine plasma TV mounted right there.
Voila, right into the wall. Wow.
This sequence is a lot of fun for me, and my imagination runs wild in a good way with what The Office could have played out like had Saul Goodman been Michael Scott.
Hi, I'm Michael Scott. Did you know that you have rights?
This interview is rough, expectedly so.
2 children,
And
yes.
you're art and painting?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the same thing. Sometimes I repeat myself.
The resume bit is great. You can find a copy online.
383 Linden Ave, Scranton, PA.
It does say that her interests are my children, painting, and art. But it also says she's been at Dunder Mifflin since 2003, which adds way more confusion to like when any of these people actually started working there.
I had a crush on you when you first started here.
Oh.
Do you remember what you said to me on my first day of work?
Enjoy this moment, because you're never going to go back to this time before you met your desk mate, Dwight. That timeline's messy.
And maybe supports the whole purgatory theory from this video. That's like plug number 3. Ultimately, Pam does turn down the job. I think she turns down the job. She does say this to Jim.
Jim, I should have told you I didn't get the job.
Oh man, I'm so sorry. You all right?
Oh, yeah, I'm more than all right. There's just nothing to celebrate.
But based on the fact that she clearly doesn't want to work for Michael again and that she doesn't want to be a receptionist, I lean towards she turned it down. Now, Jim, on the other hand, arranged this pretty nice picnic dinner in his office.
Chopsticks is not the measure of a man.
And I think this serves more of the literary aspect of how to understand this episode more than anything. It's almost a way to show that Jim has moved on. This is where his head, his heart, and his life is.
And a little bit your penis.
And he's excited to bring Pam into this space, into this life that he has created, to celebrate her willingness to move on from Scranton. And she communicates that she's not really ready for that.
I don't know if I want this.
Which is something that we've been tracking since the start of the season. This moment causes the two to flutter back and forth with strained niceties about life and where they're headed in life. And this whole story just concludes in silence. But this episode actually concludes with a stinger that's shot shockingly like a cold opening, with Oscar watching videos on his computer and then spinning his ad breaks with these ridiculous vertical sit-ups. Quick question, how do you spend your ad breaks? That was a test for me. Let me know in the comments if you saw an ad or not. Just trying to figure out this whole algorithm.
There's only one computer that I trust, and it's powered by Thai food and Spanish Reds.
Anyway, the whole stinger is that it's really just a setup for the cameraman, like with prophetic knowledge or something, to just sweep the whole bullpen and capture a notification on Oscar's computer, teasing the documentary's pending release. We have a lot to talk about, so let's dive into the deeper meaning.
What does a bean mean?
Someone please explain it to Kat.
Unlike the last couple episodes, we're back to the season 9 model for an episode, which doesn't have a lot to say as a standalone instance of The Office. Instead, it weaves a consistent theme throughout the story arcs in order to help the viewers understand the headspace of these characters. Moving On is the title of the episode, and it is a little on the nose, but that is the central theme of each story, both exploring what moving on looks like for a lot of these characters, but also even if people can really ever actually move on. First statement the show suggests is that moving on is risky. This is seen with Aaron and Pete moving on in their relationship, only to be confronted with Andy's unbridled rage. But it's also probably most clearly represented when Toby is encouraged to move on, and when he attempts to do so, as life has done so many times before, moving on ends up breaking his neck.
I went ziplining my 3rd day in Costa Rica. I broke my neck. It's nice to have visitors.
Pam's story explores this from a different angle, in which her call to move on is coming from her husband specifically, not from some sort of inner urge. And Jim, by all measures, has already moved on. Not really from her, but moved on from the life that they knew and looking towards a new life. Now, Pam's motivating anchor point, and sorry to keep playing this clip over and over again, but it is important.
I love my boring life.
Come on.
Exactly the way it is.
In her story, we do get a little bit of the risk of like the negative stuff that can happen when you move on. But also, there's a little bit of an exploration here of if it's not just right, why even move on in the first place? And in an episode specifically showing bad things happening to people who are moving on, it's not crazy that she wants to pump the brakes. She could just uproot her life and move to a new city and start a new life. But should she have to? Like, what's her actual obligation here?
How is this on me?
Watching back through season 9 for this series, I guess what hadn't occurred to me on previous rewatches is that there was never seemingly an agreement of, if this business thing goes well, let's move to Philly. Instead, it seems to be implicit in Jim's mind that this is where this is headed, but it's the opposite in Pam's. Meaning that Pam's not actually dropping some real bomb here by saying that she doesn't want to move. I mean, she is, for sure, but Jim has already moved and has now moved the goalpost for what could be status quo for Pam. But in reality, all she's saying is, I'm not sure I'm ready to move on.
It's a little out of left field.
Is it?
And hey, this stuff happens all the time, but you have to, talk that stuff out. We're going to talk about that in another episode. What we do see in this one is that neither of these guys are using their big boy or big girl words.
Way beyond my vocabulary.
I know where this is going.
Do you?
No.
Okay.
On the other side of the table, though, from what we can read, Jim's reaction maybe suggests that moving on requires sacrifice, even sacrifice things that are valuable to you. Considering that when she says she doesn't want to move, his take isn't, oh, you don't want to move? Well, let's figure that out. It's probably not fair for me to expect you to uproot your life and where your family is and where you grew up without ever even really talking about it. His take is, well, I started a business in Philly.
Team Halpert, okay? You're gonna crush it.
I mean, stand on business, I guess, I get it. But I think I noticed something in this watch through that I hadn't noticed before, which I can't decide if I love or hate. But there is a mirroring of stories that becomes clearer as we go through this arc.
You did this! Damn it, I'm happy!
Jim's reaction here for sure mirrors Andy leaving on that boat, sailing off to pursue his own will. Pam then is the Aaron in the story left on the dock by herself, except not really by herself. And I don't know if that's like poetic parallelism or, Chris just overthinking things. But Andy then in this specific episode may represent dealing with hurts from earlier decisions and the fallout from all of that on the boat. And while Aaron and Pete's plot really call into question, can somebody even move on in the first place? Can you ever get over these things from your past? They're together with their exes for less than an afternoon, and everything devolves into chaos. But then again, that's subverted when Andy seems to actually be able to move on after creating this chaos.
Does making Aaron and Pete feel bad make me feel better? Yeah. Yeah. It does.
And then again with the Dwight and Angela story, where their reconnection throughout this afternoon ends with a peaceful and respectful resolution with Angela not ready to move on from her current bad situation. And Dwight equally ready to then move on, because I'm pretty sure he does that very quickly.
Fortunately, my feelings regenerate at twice the speed of a normal man's.
All of these themes sometimes have to pack up and move on in spite of the emotional baggage left behind or how heavy some of the load you're going to have to carry throughout this. Does fantastically bring in the weird, odd life of Timothy Green inclusion.
Guess what poster he had on his wall?
Not Night at the Roxbury.
The Odd Life of Timothy Green.
Which has to do with all sorts of things about moving on and dealing with some of those hurts from your past. So at the end of it, the call to action here is, I guess, count the cost of moving on before you do it.
Andy?
And don't be Andy. It feels right. Let's rate this.
This is the worst.
Okay, I keep telling myself that I'm going to make these videos shorter, and then I keep not doing that. But this is a 40-minute episode, so naturally this is going to be longer.
That's what she said.
So the cold opening is not very good as a cold opening. It's not particularly grabby or funny, but it does do well of keeping the story flowing, especially when you're binge streaming the show. I will give it a 1 out of 5.
Busted!
I wouldn't be shocked to hear that this was actually just a part of the episode that got plopped down in the beginning.
Flop.
Because then also, like I said, the stinger also is shot like a cold opening, but maybe the Oscar does vertical sit-ups is just didn't have enough pizzazz.
A little more zing and a little more pep.
And then they had the idea of, oh, we should invoke the documentary thing. Because also, if you notice, there is a very quick jump cut when the camera is swooping. What's the right word there? It's not panning.
I'm not going anywhere!
Pan?
What would you call that? I don't know. Anyway, you can notice the jump cut when they go from looking at Oscar to the notification popping up on Oscar's desk. I don't know what any of that means, but it does seem like this episode was kind of chopped to pieces and put back together in a way that maybe wasn't in the way the script was written. That's just a guess, because if you think about it, the Toby plotline isn't even introduced until 18 minutes into the episode, which is when a normal story would be hitting its climax.
That's what she said?
And the Strangler story resolves then with about 10 minutes left in the episode. So that specifically feels choppy, and yet none of this feels sluggish or boring or anything else that I would expect from a late season 9 hour-long episode. In fact, there's a lot of moments in this that I thoroughly enjoyed. I really like the Strangler stuff. As much as I hate what they've done to Andy, I don't hate this story, especially its resolution. 98% of the Jim Pam stuff in this episode is really good, and I found the Bob Odenkirk particularly delightful. The conclusion of the Jim Pam drama, though, this is not my jam.
I don't know if I want this.
While some of this is real and maybe even super real for some people, it's not my Jim and Pam. Having said all of that, though, some of the decisions made in this episode's filming are top notch. Like, I don't know if I'm looking for these things because I know now that Jon Favreau directed this, but like, take the dinner scene. It's shot so well.
Hello?
Hey, back here.
The real estate version of Michael Scott, and that was this guy.
With the setting of Jim's cold concrete office representing his current place, awesome. Probably a writing decision, but it is shot so well as well. The way the light comes down, center over the table, makes no sense from like, why would you have an office light that bright overlooking like one, there's no spotlight there, but it works. The way the lighting hits Pam's face creates a general diffusion of the light, which makes everything on her face seem very soft. There's no harsh shadows. That's all juxtaposed to Jim, who at times, even in this, looks like when I was a kid and you'd hold a flashlight up under your face and you get that light to show up so you look like, you know, you're evil.
I am so scared when people don't label their personal food.
All of which just kind of helps create the vibe of what's going on here. Even the Dwight and Angela porch scene is shot very differently, and it adds to the drama in a kind of a subtle but good way. I particularly even like this shot of Angela leaving with Dwight in the background. None of this is The Office, but it's really well made. Even when Pam's talking to Jim on the phone while she's on, like, I guess the futon he's been sleeping on, and there's this sunset light coming through the shades, and yet none of that harsh lights or shadows are hitting her. It's almost suggesting that the sun is setting behind her, that it is time to move on. These are all decisions that I think uplift this episode, which is not a top tier episode of The Office. There is some well-written comedy, and a guest director who is good at his trade seems like it breathes some life into this season that desperately needed it. I don't love this. I don't hate it. It's getting a 3 out of 5, which is one of the best ratings of season 9 in the last 10 episodes.
There you go. Good for you.
But that's just what I think about. Moving on, let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, you can support this video just by giving this one a like or subscribing. Those things are free. If you do that, you'll get notified next time when we talk about the pilot for a spin-off series that never was. Thanks to everybody who is supporting the channel on Patreon or YouTube memberships, which include this growing list of fine folks, starting with our Dundee's host, Amber Piercy, Anna, Dark Lasagna, and our Inner Circle members, Avery, Heidi and the Una, Valerie, Jackie Estes, Mooch, Yesher, and Native Penguin. And thank you so much for everybody else who contributes. Thank you for watching this. Links are in the description if you want to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.